As I noted in 2015's Baphomet, The Temple Mystery Unveiled, co-written with Alexander Rivera, the Oxford English Dictionary says that the first appearance As I noted in 2015's Baphomet, The Temple Mystery Unveiled, co-written with Alexander Rivera, the Oxford English Dictionary says that the first appearance of the name Baphomet in English text was in the Classical Journal, Volume 5, published in 1812, in an article by Charles Villers called Some Account of the Researches of the German Literati on the Subject of Ancient Literature and History. A French scholar referred to only as Monsieur Lentz is quoted from an essay of his entitled On the Goddess of Paphos as Represented on Ancient Monuments and on the Baphomet. This referred to a goddess worshipped in the coastal city of Paphos on the island of Cyprus, where the Templars were stationed. Idols of the goddess were used as landmarkers, just as statues of Hermes, the Greek wisdom god, were also used in ancient times. These images of the goddess had gradually combined with and then transmuted into images of Hermes himself. Monsieur Lentz suggested that the name of these markers, Mete, got fused with that of Paphos to form Paphometa and thus Baphomet. Jules Michelet referred to François Just Marie Raynouard's The Templars, Tragedy in 5 Acts, 1805, regarding the origin of the word. Monsieur Raynouard considers the word Baphomet in these two depositions as an alteration of that of Mahomet, mentioned by the first Templar witness, and sees in it a desire on the part of the examiners to confirm the charges of a good understanding with the Saracens so generally reported of the Templars. In their depositions, the Templars admit nothing more serious than that they have felt alarm, that they have fancied that they saw a devil's head, a moth's head, that in these ceremonies they have seen the devil himself under the shape of a cat, or of a woman. The word moth appears to originate in French as a way of spelling this alleged alteration of Muhammad, the name of the Muslim prophet, which supposedly morphed into the word Baphomet. Variations seen in print also include Mafez and Mafoumet, according to the Bulletin de la Société Académique de Lyon, Volume 21, 1876. In the book The View of the State of Europe During the Middle Ages by Henry Hallam, published in 1818, the author concurs that the word is, quote, an early French corruption of Muhammad. This goes along with the reports, mentioned by Raynouard and Michelet, that the Templars were suspected at the time of their trials of having been secret converts to Islam and secret friends of their supposed enemies, the Saracens. In one night's confession, he mentioned that he had been taught to exclaim the word Yalla during the blasphemous ceremonies, which he said was, quote, a word of the Saracens. Also, according to the online etymology dictionary, Muhammad was used in the Middle Ages as a generic word for idol. While editing the English translation of Joseph von Hammer-Purgstall's Mysterium Baphometis Revelatum, I also found that he had mentioned a similar variation on Baphomet's name, spelled here with an S instead of an F or PH. He quoted the confession of Gosseran de Montparnasse, which said, quote, their superior showed him an idol, bearded and made in the likeness of Baphomet. It is a terrible figure which resembles a devil, saying, in the French, Mousse, an idol that was in the form of a human head with a big beard. It occurred to me that this word is very similar to Maus, the German word for mouse. This made me think about the fact that Mickey Mouse is one of the most popular fictional characters in the world, and and the silhouette of his head is among the most recognizable corporate logos ever designed. Although it is an extremely simple design, Disney Corp is very litigious towards anyone who attempts to utilize this symbol, which is why they sued electro musician Deadmau5 for also using a logo featuring the black head of a mouse with 2 large ears. It seems that according to Disney, any unauthorized use of 3 circles combined is infringing on their copyright, if the circle on the bottom is larger than the others. They don't even have to be perfect circles. Ever since I first saw it, the Deadmau5 logo has brought to mind the icon of the Death's Head, a glyph featuring a human head often with 2 thigh bones shown beneath. It was used by the Templars on their gravestones, most likely as a reference to the Baphomet, and later became incorporated into the Jolly Roger flag flown by pirates. It was also used in alchemy to symbolize the state of putrefaction, and by the Nazi SS to make them seem fearsome. Amazingly, in the German language, not only does Maus mean mouse, but with an E added on the end, it can be either a verb for the act of catching a mouse, a verb meaning to pinch, or an adjective that means stone dead. When an R is added, it becomes the noun for a pinch, and also designates the point of a knife. This may be significant, for the Knights Templar took their initiation oaths with the point of a sword pointed at their breast, the tip touching the skin to make an impression. The purpose of this was to remind them of how they would be murdered if they revealed the Order's secrets to anybody. Those secrets included the kidnapping, drugging, torturing, and murdering of children for their rituals. As it turns out, Deadmau5 may very well know about these implicit connections between the word mouse, the Death's Head, and Baphomet, for he calls himself Goat Lord on Twitter, and has been photographed many times wearing a t-shirt emblazoned with a full figure of Baphomet. He performs on stage in a cube-shaped structure he calls, quote, the Mousetrap. The Mouse-Baphomet connection might have ended there for me had I not thought about the chocolate mousse in the film Rosemary's Baby, used by the satanic cult in the film as a vector to surreptitiously intoxicate Rosemary with something to make her sleep while she's being raped by Satan in a ritual. The mousse is made by Rosemary's neighbor, Minnie Castevet, who, along with her husband Roman Castevet, acts on behalf of the cult as Rosemary's handler, initiating Rosemary's husband Guy into the cult and manipulating Rosemary into unwittingly being impregnated with the Antichrist. The mousse is delivered to Rosemary and Guy by Minnie as a gift while they are having a romantic dinner at home. Rosemary, who can taste the contaminant in the dessert, complains of a, quote, undertaste, and sneakily dumps the remainder of her mousse in her napkin when Guy isn't looking. The connection between this scene and not only the mouse, Baphomet symbolism, but specifically Mickey Mouse, is underscored by the fact that the character's name, Minnie, is the same as that of Mickey Mouse's wife, and that Minnie specifically pronounces the word moose as mouse. With her overly rouged cheeks, occasionally sporting a black and white polka dot do-rag tied into a bow on the top of her head, Mrs. Castevet even resembles Minnie Mouse. During the sex ritual, Guy expresses concern that Rosemary might be regaining consciousness, but Minnie assures him she can't see. As long as she ate the mouse, she can't see nor hear. The mouse, then, is an agent that causes comatose paralysis, rendering the victim blind and deaf, with short-term amnesia after the fact. Let us recall that the term slipping a Mickey is used to describe the poisoning of someone's drink in order to cause this very same effect, analogous to the more modern term roofie. It originated with the famed use of chloral hydrate on unsuspecting customers by saloon owner Mickey Finn, who was accused of robbing his comatose poisoned patrons in Chicago in the 1890s. The director of Rosemary's Baby, Roman Polanski, used the same tactic years later on the 13-year-old girl that he famously raped in a hot tub at a party, leading to his exile from the United States. Note that the leader of the satanic cult portrayed in the film is also named Roman, and that Polanski's pregnant wife ended up being murdered by another satanic cult, the Manson family, while he was out of town. That gang also drugged victims to take advantage of them, and the leader of that group used drugs to control the minds of the members. That the poisoned moose in Rosemary's Baby is meant to connect symbolically with the image of an actual mouse is driven home with repeated mentions of a, quote, mouse bite during Rosemary's feverish dream she has that night while she's being raped. She sees a nurse who says to her, "I'm sorry you're not feeling well," to which Rosemary replies, "It's just the mouse bite." The nurse then responds, "We'd better tie your legs down in case of convulsions." Seconds later, someone dressed as the Pope says to Rosemary, "They tell me you've been bitten by a mouse," and she replies, "That's why I couldn't come to see you." This implies that the mouse bite, the Mousse, somehow prevented her from connecting to God through the religion that she was raised in, resulting in the demon-induced trance state. The hidden symbolism behind the words mouse and mousse fit oh so subtly with what is going on in the story. Mouse bites, of course, can not only be quite painful, but are prone to infection, and sometimes communicate potentially fatal diseases such as hantavirus. Mousse is an old French word meaning froth or scum, and shares common roots with the English word mushroom. Of course, intoxication is always toxic to some extent. Rosemary only ate a mouse-sized portion of her dessert, though, so it only partially affected her, leaving her conscious through much of the ritual. At one point, she even screamed out loud, "This is no dream. This is really happening." The next morning, she woke up and remembered a dream of being raped by, quote, something inhuman. The creator of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, was employed as a consultant for the film by Polanski to make the scene as authentic as possible. In other words, the movie depicts things that a satanic witch coven would actually do. Indeed, the tactic of using drugs such as chloroform to incapacitate and then kidnap a new recruit for the initiation ceremony is one said to be used by the Astrum Argentum occult order. And it is what the Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale was depicted as doing in the film The Skulls. Historically, there are other instances in which mice have been used by Satanists as vectors to poison people. The process is described in J.K. Huysman's novel La Basse, when one of his characters, Karhe, tells his friends about a Catholic priest who secretly worships the devil. Quote, "Well, wherever he travels, Doker takes along with him some white mice which he keeps in cages. He feeds them on consecrated hosts and on pastes impregnated with minute doses of poison. When these unfortunate rodents are saturated, he holds them over a chalice and, with a sharp instrument, pricks them here and there. The blood, which is collected in a vase, is employed by him to strike down his enemies. From time to time he employs a formula invented by a society of Satanists called the Re-Theurgist Optimates, of whom I have spoken before, and he prepares a mixture comprised of flour, meat, the wafer of the Eucharist, mercury, animal semen, human blood, acetate of morphine, and aspic oil. More recently, according to Gavinji, he has taken to producing an even more venomous concoction. Fish are stuffed with communion wafers and gradually graded toxins. These toxins are selected from among those which induce madness or cause tetanus when absorbed through the pores of the skin. Then, when these fishes are thoroughly permeated with these sacrilegious substances, Doker removes them from the water, leaves them to rot, and then distills them in such a manner that a single drop of essential oil he so extracts is enough to make a man go mad. A case of bewitchment by means of the veniniferous blood of mice occurred in Chalons-sur-Marne in 1879, and true enough, a canon did belong to this satanic cult. When asked to explain, quote, how it is possible to poison a man at a distance this way, Karhe reveals, "The magician employs a medium, a woman who is known in such circles as, quote, a flying spirit. These women are somnambulists who, when hypnotized, can transport themselves wherever you like. In this way you can use them to transmit the magic potions to the designated person even if he is hundreds of miles away. Those who are stricken in such a manner have seen no one, and they go mad or die without suspecting the venefice." Later, the main character in the story, Durtal, thinks to himself, is the idea of a larva, some flying spirit, any less extraordinary than that of a microbe traveling immense distances in order to secretly poison you? Why shouldn't the Earth's atmosphere be chock-a-block with elemental spirits as well as bacteria? So it seems to me we now have multiple reasons why giving someone, quote, the mouse, could have developed into a secret code for poisoning someone, made use of with multiple variations by several secret societies and crime syndicates, most connected to Satanism. The term might apply to this act when performed for various reasons, either to murder or hex the victim, or to render them unconscious so that they can be victimized, or to kidnap them for initiation into a secret order which they may have, as in the case of Astrum Argentum, voluntarily agreed to join, perhaps without knowing that this would result in being kidnapped. Mouse could also be used to refer to substances given to lower the defenses of the initiate/victim, to make it easier to program his or her mind with hypnosis. Add to this the term Mouseburger, introduced by Helen Gurley Brown, founder of Cosmopolitan magazine, to refer to the use of subtle psychological manipulation to dominate people whilst appearing to play a subordinate role. The fact that Moz also means to pinch, a pinch, at knife point, or the point of a knife, may explain why we refer to a drink that has been surreptitiously contaminated with drugs as having been, quote, spiked. Also, another way of delivering the drug to the victim is with the use of a poison dart. Then consider the fact that Disney's trademarked mouse logo of 3 black circles resembles the club symbol used on a deck of playing cards, and that these were initially called basto in Spanish or bastoni in Italian, meaning a cudgel. Besides poison, another way to render a person incapacitated is to club them over the head. This is what happened to Hiram Abif in the Masonic ritual. The blow supposedly kills him, but later in the rite he is resurrected, proving that it was non-lethal, just like a slipped Mickey. Of course, now that I have mentioned this, you will immediately think of the Mickey Mouse Club, where the magic words used to perform tricks are always Miska, Muska, Mickey Mouse. As the sorcerer's apprentice and the figurehead of the Magic Kingdom, Mickey presumably knows a great deal about the practice of magic. The Mickey Mouse Club has been responsible for bringing us a high percentage of our culture's popular music stars over the last several decades. These stars start out as actors on Disney's TV shows, then later become pop music sirens, enticing the youth of the world towards the wide-open gates of hell as they spin out their train-wreck lives on the public stage for all to see, exhibiting all of the classic traits of sexual abuse and mind control victimhood along the way. Some relevant information connecting Satanism and mind control to both Disney cartoon films, and Mickey Mouse in particular, were mentioned in my 2005 book, Mind-Controlled Sex Slaves in the CIA. Summarizing my interview with professed mind control victim Kathy O'Brien, I wrote, according to Kathy, she was controlled with a form of neuro-linguistic programming used on many monarch slaves, which involved the use of themes from Wizard of Oz and various Disney children's films. She was taught to go into another dimension, quote, over the rainbow, whenever the pain of the abuse became too much to bear, and to identify with Cinderella when her father assigned her a strict daily regimen of household chores, which was part of her slave programming. The hallucinogenic and multidimensional themes of Alice in Wonderland were also quite extensively used. This was done not just to Kathy, but to all her brothers and sisters as well, who were all being used in the program. As she writes in her book, my brother, now 37, remains psychologically locked into those traumatic childhood years and is obsessed with Disney themes and productions to this day. His house is decorated in Disney memorabilia, he wears Disney clothes, listens to my father's instructions on a Disney telephone, and maintains When You Wish Upon a Star as his favorite song, which has locked his children into the same theme. Interestingly, the Disney programming claim is one made by almost every, quote, recovered MKUltra monarch slave, although it's difficult to determine whether these claims began to surface before or after the publication of Kathy's book. For example, a number of them say that they were taken to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma, where they were placed in electrified, quote, Tinkerbell cages, and tortured into creating child alters that would, like Peter Pan, never grow up.
You'll see that the eating cycle of the rodents will become more intense. They'll work harder and fight harder to get food that sometimes will be where they expect it and sometimes it will not. We'll teach them that the food is always behind the red door. And when they have that well learned, we'll take the food away and put it behind the white door. And when they learn that, we'll switch again and again and again To what end?
Another direct connection between Mickey Mouse and the satanic ritual abuse subject is Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, who I described in my book as, quote, a former Green Beret and senior U.S. military intelligence officer once involved in the study of psyops, or psychological warfare. He wrote an extensive essay with Colonel Paul E. Valalay, a Fox News Channel analyst, called From Psyop to Mind War, The Psychology of Victory. In this essay, the authors advocated the use of propaganda, subliminal messages, air ionization, and ELF waves to induce specific states of mind, both domestically and abroad, in order to manipulate public opinion. Another interesting fact about Michael Aquino, he just happens to be the leader and founder of the Temple of Set, a splinter group of the Church of Satan, in which Aquino was once a high-ranking member. The Temple of Set now has a number of chapters that operate on military bases. Interestingly, this group's rituals often involve Nazi symbols and rhetoric. Aquino once even performed a satanic working at Heinrich Himmler's castle of Wewelsburg while in Germany on, quote, official NATO business. Predictably, this has caused no shortage of controversy to surround Michael Aquino. In the late 1980s, a satanic ritual abuse scandal broke out at a daycare center on the Presidio military base in San Francisco, where Aquino was stationed. The children accused Aquino, as well as a Baptist minister named Gary Hambright, who was indicted but not convicted. These kids claimed that the people who molested them were part of a, quote, devil worship club, and were able to describe the inside of Aquino's house, where the abuse was said to have taken place. Other children identified Aquino by his nickname, Mickey. His one-time associate Anton LaVey claimed that Aquino's nickname was actually Mickey because his peculiar haircut made him look like Mickey Mouse. Although Aquino was never indicted and the charges against Hambright were dropped, several of the children contracted STDs, proving that someone had abused them. Later, after Hambright died of AIDS, the U.S. Army wrote to the children's parents, urging them to get their children tested for HIV. While it is true that Aquino's affected and embellished widow's peak resembles the shape of the black peak between Mickey's ears, this is to be expected from a publicly known leader of a Satanist group, as this feature has long been associated with dark characters. From the demon Mephistopheles in Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, the name probably related to mephitic, meaning foul-smelling, another possible connection with moth, to modern depictions of devils, vampires, and warlocks, all have a widow's peak either formed with their hair or with a black hood draped over the head. LaVey himself wore such a hood during rituals, but why does Mickey Mouse have a widow's peak? Indeed, have you ever seen in nature a mouse with a face that was a totally different color from the rest of its body? I have seen mice with less fur around their noses, so that their skin was showing through more in that area, but certainly not around the eyes, like Mickey. I have never once seen a black mouse with a white or pink flesh-colored face. We assume that anthropomorphized cartoon animals are created with a great deal of artistic license when it comes to their anatomy. Nonetheless, the mind is always searching for meaning, for rhyme and reason. So when we wonder why Donald Duck wears a hat and shirt but no pants, or why Mickey can have Pluto as a pet but treat Goofy as a peer, we might also wonder about the intent behind the design of Mickey's face. To me, it looks like he's wearing a mask and a hood similar to those worn at Venetian balls, as featured in Eyes Wide Shut. I'm certainly not the only one to think so. Walt Disney himself saw that Mickey's face lent itself to the look of a gas mask, and he personally designed a child-sized gas mask fitted with Mickey Mouse ears to make chemical attacks less frightening for kids. These masks were actually put into production by the U.S. government and can now be found in military museums. There may even be one at the Walt Disney Family Museum, which is located, oddly enough, at the Presidio Army Base in San Francisco, where Satanist Lieutenant Colonel Michael Mickey Mouse Aquino was accused of raping children in satanic rituals. Perhaps more than any other children's cartoon character, Mickey Mouse has been used for culture jamming purposes, and just to be menacing, by altering his features into something scary. These representations are easy enough to find, and there are hundreds of variations. Marilyn Manson, a member of the Church of Satan who also has the initials MM in his stage name, and who named himself after the Satanist who had Roman Polanski's wife murdered, famously went on tour once wearing an evil Mickey Mouse costume. Recently, Satanist, rap artist, and Marilyn Manson acolyte Lil Uzi Vert spent a fortune on a diamond-encrusted necklace featuring a representation of Marilyn Manson in this guise.
Vert might have 3 million Instagram followers, but he only follows one account, and that's Marilyn Manson. So to say that the shock rocker has been an inspiration to the rapper would be an understatement.
Regarding Mickey Mouse's widow's peak, I presume it is meant to imply the shape of the letter M. But with the line formed by his snout and mandibles, when you look at him straight on, it also kind of looks like the capital letter B on its side. Is this B/M a hidden reference to Baphomet? The widow's peak feature of some people's hair is supposedly so named because it resembles what was once a common feature of the hat that would hold the veil of widow's weeds, traditional mourning garments for widows. This connects it to the veil of Isis, the most famous widow of the Egyptian pantheon, for whom the Freemasons identify themselves as the widow's sons. Isis is in many ways analogous to Cybele, whom Hammer Purgstall saw Baphomet as a representation of. Isis, called Ishtar by the Babylonians, was also the queen of prostitutes. The tithes that were given to her temples gave her worshippers the right to utilize the, quote, sacred prostitutes who were obliged to serve her in this manner. Amazingly, the terrorist group ISIS now controls thousands of women that they have kidnapped and forced into sexual slavery. As I have shown in the past, they now freely post videos on YouTube and Instagram selling people, and selling access to sites where, it is implied, patrons will find footage of men, women, and children being tortured, raped, and murdered. Several of these YouTube advertisements make open reference to mind control techniques perfected by the CIA's MKUltra experiments, and use as their insignia a cartoon face with a creepy smile and an injured eyeball poking through a leather bondage mask, taken from the anime show Tokyo Ghoul. This show is all about a race of cannibalistic, semi-human monsters hiding within the human population, preying on them in secret, while the government shields them from public awareness. Considering the well-documented connections between ISIS and the CIA, as well as the US military, the symbolism is apt. Returning once more to the subject of the mouse, and the possible connection with the use by Satanists of consecrated communion wafers, it is worth revisiting what I wrote in my book Hocus Pocus, The Magical Power of St. Peter, regarding the origin of the word Mass as used in the Church. Quote, "The origin of the word Mass, like the ritual itself, can be found in the rites of the cult of Mithras. The Catholic Eucharist, in which bread and wine is ritually consumed, is done in commemoration of the last meal that was shared by Jesus and his disciples. Likewise, in the mystery religion of Mithraism, a ritual involving the consumption of bread and wine was celebrated in commemoration of the last meal that the legendary Mithras is said to have shared with the sun god Helios before ascending to the highest realm. The bread in the Mithraic ritual was called the Mizd, a word reminiscent of the name of the Persian god Ahura Mazda in the Zoroastrian religion, sometimes spelled Ormuzd or Ormus. The word Mazd is the probable origin for the title of the Catholic ritual known as Mass, in which the Eucharist is consumed. The word is probably also related to the Jewish name for unleavened bread, matzah, which they consume ritually every Passover. The Mithraic Mizd was a small round cake embossed with an equilateral cross on top. It was identical in size, shape, and ornament to the communion wafers now used in Catholic Mass, which are small discs of unleavened bread with a cross on top. At the Last Supper, Jesus told his disciples to drink wine and eat bread, quote, in remembrance of him. He also said that the bread was his flesh and that the wine was his blood. So by consuming them, Catholics believe they are becoming one with Jesus, who is himself one with God the Father. Thus, the Eucharist is a sacrificial rite as well, a recreation of the ritual sacrifice of Jesus to God on the cross, laid upon the altar. It is also a way of internalizing the Holy Spirit. It is because the bread represents the body of the sacrifice that Catholics call it the, quote, host, which is derived from the Latin word hostia, meaning sacrificial victim. It also denotes someone who is being held prisoner, which is where we get the English word hostage. Before his execution, of course, Jesus was held captive, but there may be another hidden meaning as well. In the Judaic rites that were once performed in the tabernacle by the ancient priesthood of Aaron, burnt offerings would be sacrificed to the Lord, whose spirit would come down as a tongue made of fire to consume them from the altar. This is why, during the Catholic rite of the Eucharist, the wine and bread are placed inside of a box or vessel on the altar that is called a, quote, tabernacle. The priests of the Israelites were able to call the Spirit of God from heaven using his secret name, so that he personally would consume the sacrifice within the sacred space of the tabernacle. Likewise, Catholics believe that a priest actually has the authority to call Jesus down from heaven and, within the sacred space of their tabernacle, cause him to physically incarnate into the bread and wine. Then God, vicariously, through the priest and congregation, consumes the sacrifice of his Son. Thus, the priest and congregation are essentially sharing a meal with Jesus and God, just as the disciples did at the Last Supper. As the priest and congregation consume the bread and wine, the Holy Spirit enters into them. The idea that a priest or magician can cause a spirit to enter into a physical object is an ancient one. The simplest way to think of it is to think of the Arabic legends of the genie in the lamp. A spirit can be invoked into a vessel and then controlled by the owner of the vessel, who can demand that the spirit performs miracles. This notion that the spiritual vessel can be an item of food or drink, which then causes the spirit to incarnate in the person who consumes it, is also ancient. This occurs in the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verses 26 through 27, where Jesus invokes Satan into a piece of bread and then gives it to Judas to eat. Judas then becomes possessed by Satan and proceeds to betray Jesus. Invoking a spirit into a vessel and then forcing it to perform miracles is indeed one of the most basic practices of witchcraft. It is no surprise then that many Protestant churches and other non-Catholic Christian groups do not celebrate the Eucharist, as they believe it to be dangerously close to the practice of witchcraft, which is expressly forbidden in the Bible. In fact, the term jack-in-the-box was originally a derogatory term used by non-Catholics to refer to the host inside of the tabernacle. Jack has for centuries been a slang term for a spirit or a demon. The term jack-in-the-box was used by those who believed that it was a demonic spirit and not Jesus that was being invoked into the communion wafer. Likewise, the term hocus pocus, slang for magic and sorcery, is derived from the Latin words used by a priest to miraculously effect the transubstantiation of the host. Hoc est corpus Jesu Christi. This is the body of Jesus Christ. Then, from hocus pocus, we also get hokum, hokey, and hoax. So what we have here is a confluence of imagery. Mice, Disney, Baphomet, the Templars, the Catholic Church, initiation into Satanism, drugging people without their knowledge, holding people against their will, slavery, prostitution, rape, murder, and mind control, all rolled up in the thwack of a cudgel, the prick of a poisoned dart, or the pinch of a spiked consumable, used as bait, just like cheese in a mousetrap. Don't you wonder if Kate Spade's husband Andy was aware of any of these connections when he stepped out of his house for the first time after his wife's suicide, wearing a mask featuring the face of one of the mice from the Disney film The Rescuers, about saving a kidnapped child? Did his brother David know about it when he dressed as a mouse eating a slice of pizza for Halloween in 2015?
Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt.